Welcome to Alternative Film. Please note, this is a movie recap. If you want the full story and the best experience, I highly recommend watching the original film. Now, sit tight. Let's dive into the recap. In a dark room, they were arguing about the presence of a stranger. That stranger was Parker, a high-level thief known for his brilliant ideas and fearless attitude. As soon as Parker introduced himself, Knox, who had been suspicious and reluctant, immediately lost his nerve. He knew Parker's reputation was legendary in the criminal underworld. Parker then scolded Knox for his stupidity, telling him to stay calm and act smarter. Once they reached an agreement, they headed out. Inside, the crew was busy breaking into the vault. It was only a matter of seconds before the heavy door would swing open. Meanwhile, a car pulled up outside the building. Out stepped a bald man and his family. Noticing an unfamiliar vehicle parked nearby, the man grew suspicious and decided to head inside to check it out. He quickly realized a robbery was in progress, but instead of running, a wild idea crossed his mind. He was going to rob the robbers. Parker and his crew stuffed the money into their bags. Once the bags were full, they rushed out of the building. The moment Knox opened the door, he was shot. The rest of the team immediately went on high alert. Parker fired back and began to chase the shooter. Meanwhile, the bald man was hit by glass shards from the gunfire. Losing his cool, he slammed his car through a fence and crashed onto a horse racing track. The track descended into chaos as riders were knocked off their horses. With Parker still hot on his heels, the bald man panicked. He sped off blindly, crashing into everything in his path until he lost control and his car ground to a halt. As the bald man stumbled out of the wreckage, Parker aimed and fired. Parker grabbed the money from the car and disappeared with his crew, leaving the racetrack behind. They finally reached their secret hideout. They got out of the car and hurried inside to give first aid to the wounded, while the rest began unloading the stolen cash. Parker went into the bathroom to wash the blood from his hands and face, but the moment he stepped out, the air was filled with gunfire. Zen had turned on them, shooting them one by one. Caught completely off guard, the entire crew was killed. Parker scrambled for his life and dove through a window. As he tried to fire back at Zen, a bullet hit him, sending him tumbling into the river below. The scene shifts to a motel where Parker woke up with his body aching in pain. He dragged himself out of his room and headed straight for room 12. Once inside, he broke open a section of the wall above the bed to retrieve his hidden stash. After settling his bill with the motel, Parker vanished into the night. Parker called his friend, Grofield, telling him he was in trouble and looking for a man named Reggie. Grofield promised to track him down. When night fell, Reggie stepped out of a building and got into his car. To his surprise, Parker was already waiting in the back seat with a gun pointed at his head. Parker demanded to know the whereabouts of a woman named Zen, the one who had murdered his crew. Just as Reggie began to spill everything he knew, a car slammed into them from the side. The impact was violent, sending the car spinning. The attackers jumped out of their vehicle and closed in, but Parker immediately opened fire. As heavy gunfire tore through the car, Parker managed to scramble out, leaving the dead Reggie behind. After a brief, intense shootout, Parker hijacked a car and sped away. The scene shifts to Zen. She was in the middle of negotiating a massive heist with a man named Bosco. Out of nowhere, Parker appeared and held Zen at gunpoint, demanding the money from their previous robbery. Zen explained that the money was already gone. She had spent it all to buy secret information and a detailed plan from Bosco for an even bigger job. Before the conversation could go any further, Parker coldly shot Bosco dead. With her partner gone, Zen confessed everything to Parker. She revealed that the target was a sunken treasure from an old shipwreck, a hoard of jewels and artifacts worth billions of dollars. Intrigued by the scale of the score, Parker decided to join forces with her. Parker introduced Grofield to Zen, and together they entered a secure building. Inside, Zen introduced them to her boss, who had already prepared everything for the heist, including a perfect replica of the statue they were targeting. After listening to the boss's detailed briefing, Parker officially agreed to join the operation. They headed to New York City to gather the latest intel. Before going inside to meet their contact, Parker and Zen took a moment to finalize their plan. Once inside, Parker broke the news that Bosco was dead. Overcome with grief, the informant began screaming and broke down in tears. Through the sobs, the informant revealed that what they were looking for was hidden in a room upstairs. But before Parker and Zen could move, a group of enemies stormed the building, threatening everyone, including the informant. Zen didn't hesitate. She pulled her gun and began picking them off one by one. Chaos erupted, and people scattered in every direction. Parker sprinted upstairs, searching every corner of the room. He finally found the target, but he wasn't alone. An enemy had followed him. A brutal fight broke out. They traded blows, using anything they could grab as a weapon. At one point, Parker was even hit with a taser. However, the enemy made a fatal mistake and plunged from the second-story window, landing right on top of a police car. Parker and Zen wasted no time. They scrambled out of the building and sped off in their car. The scene shifts to a new headquarters where the full team had gathered. They began drafting a new plan for the heist, carefully scouting the location and assigning specific roles to each member. Their goal was ambitious. They planned to derail the train carrying the treasure and bring it down exactly at their designated extraction point. Afterward, Parker headed to his favorite hotel and checked into his usual room. When he walked in, he found Zen already waiting for him. She began talking about how priceless the treasure really was, but their conversation was cut short when attackers burst in and ambushed them. When Parker finally came to, he found himself outside in the freezing snow. His hands were bound, and the biting cold made it nearly impossible to move. Just then, Zen appeared and freed him, and together they managed to fight off the remaining threat. As they were preparing to leave, a phone rang. Parker answered. It was his enemy, Lazzini. During the call, Lazzini taunted him, claiming that Parker's plan had already failed because Lazzini had moved the schedule up. The heist was happening now, not tomorrow. Hearing this, Parker and Zen scrambled into their car and called Grofield, telling him to move into position immediately. Grofield sped off at full throttle, racing to keep up with the train's schedule. Meanwhile, the train was picking up speed, moving faster by the second. At one point, Grofield crashed his vehicle and had to sprint towards the tracks on foot. He desperately tried to disable the train's speed governor, but the locomotive was already roaring out of control. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to Parker's plan. The train didn't derail because it wasn't moving fast enough to jump the tracks at that spot. Thinking fast, they moved to the next sharp curve. Grofield rushed there to finish the job, and with a few well-aimed shots, he finally destroyed the train's safety mechanism. The train derailed at full speed, crashing violently and destroying everything in its path. Parker and Grofield climbed onto the wreckage and hauled down the treasure chest. But when they forced it open, their hearts sunk. The chest contained nothing but a single worthless rock. In the middle of their frustration, Lazzini's men suddenly swarmed the area, and a fierce gunfight broke out. With the sound of police sirens approaching, Parker and his crew knew they had to move. Just as they were about to be cornered by a police blockade, Stan appeared out of nowhere to provide cover. With his help, they managed to break through and finally escape the scene for good. The next day at the hideout, Zen prepared to leave, intending to return to her hometown. Parker stopped her, pulling her aside to convince her to stay. He shared the story of his past and the events that led him into a life of crime. The point of his story was clear. Parker was a master planner, and he wasn't finished yet. They went back inside, where Parker announced he had a new plan. Grofield and the others were frustrated, openly blaming him for the previous night's failure. However, Parker remained unshaken. With total confidence, he explained that the true prize wasn't inside the chest. The key to the heist was the statue itself. Convinced by his vision, the team began to gear up once more.
The scene shifts. Parker and Grofield disguised themselves in police uniforms, knocked on the door, and made their way inside. Once they were in, they drew their weapons on Kincaid, demanding to know the name of the statue's buyer. Kincaid was paralyzed with fear. He still had trauma from the time Parker threw him off a building. The sheer panic was too much for him, and he fainted on the spot. Parker and Grofield began bickering and blaming each other for the mishap, but they noticed a nurse standing nearby. When they questioned her, she revealed she knew the buyer's name. Apparently, Kincaid had spent the entire day talking about no one else but Phineas Paul. Parker and Grofield thanked the nurse and headed out to track him down. Parker arrived and held Phineas at gunpoint, but Phineas made the mistake of thinking it was all a bluff. To show he was serious, Parker shot one of Phineas's associates. They dragged Phineas through the back door and shoved him into the car. Terrified by Parker's threats, Phineas began to talk. He revealed the secret location of the treasure, the Greenbrook private vault. He warned them that even he couldn't break into it. The vault was made of reinforced materials and protected by a high-tech security system that only opened at a preset time. But to Parker, that was just another challenge to overcome. Back at the hideout, they removed Phineas's hood and left Stan in charge of guarding him. Meanwhile, the rest of the team gathered to brainstorm. They went back and forth, tossing out ideas on how to crack the vault. Once they agreed on a strategy, they headed straight for the Greenbrook private vault. Inside the facility, the security guards were relaxed, lazily watching their monitors. Suddenly, the camera feeds went dark after a car accidentally crashed into the exterior unit. One guard stepped outside to investigate. Waiting in the shadows, Grofield put on a brilliant performance to distract the guard, allowing Zen to swoop in and take him down. Grofield grabbed the guard's keys and slipped inside. He made his way to the security room and quickly neutralized the remaining guards. Back at the hideout, Stan had gotten heavily drunk, allowing Phineas to seize the opportunity and escape. Phineas immediately called Lozini, tipping him off that Parker and the crew were raiding the Greenbrook vault for the treasure. Lozini scrambled his men and raced to the location. By the time they arrived, Parker had already blown the vault door open and cleared out everything inside. Without a second thought, Lozini and his team gave chase, determined to take back the loot. In the middle of a snowy forest, Parker dodged a hail of gunfire from Lozini's men. The straps securing the treasure had come loose during the shootout, forcing Parker to jump out of the vehicle to tighten them. The situation turned chaotic as the heavy snow and limited visibility made it hard to see the enemy. The chase eventually broke out of the forest and into a residential area. During a sharp turn, Parker was thrown from the vehicle and crashed into a house. Desperate not to be left behind, he scrambled to his feet and sprinted after Grofield's getaway car. As Parker leapt to grab onto the moving vehicle, the strap he was holding onto snapped, sending him tumbling back to the ground. Lozini's men closed in and opened fire, but just as they were about to finish him, Zen arrived and saved him. Meanwhile, Grofield was cornered by the enemy. As he swerved to dodge their gunfire, the hook snapped and the treasure fell right into Lozini's hands. Lozini had the prize delivered straight to Phineas's house. As Phineas began to admire the beauty of the treasure, a diamond encrusted on the statue's chest suddenly popped off and fell. Panicked, Phineas scrambled to pick it up, but his heart sank. The diamond was a cheap imitation and the statue itself was a fake. He immediately called Lozini to report the devastating news. They had gone through all that trouble for a worthless replica. Meanwhile, Parker and his team were already back at Greenbrook. They began setting up the equipment needed to crack the actual vault containing the real statue. Once everything was in place, they triggered the charges and the vault door blew open. Zen rushed inside, mesmerized by the beauty of the statue. They quickly secured the treasure and prepared the getaway car. However, Lozini arrived before they could leave. Lozini held Parker at gunpoint, forcing him to drop his weapon. Lozini couldn't help but admire Parker's brilliance. By simply repainting the vault numbers, changing number 1 to number 3, Parker had thrown everyone off the scent. Parker, however, knew that Lozini's organization was on the verge of bankruptcy and desperate for this win. To destroy Lozini once and for all, Parker revealed his final trap. He had rigged the entire statue with explosives. Parker pressed the detonator and the statue blew apart, leaving nothing but dust. Under the cover of the smoke and debris, Parker rose from the debris and grabbed his pistol. He walked over to Lozini, who lay helpless among the wreckage. With a final, cold efficiency, he finished him off, effectively dismantling Lozini's entire criminal empire. As the facility began to burn, Parker calmly walked away from the flames. Grofield was already waiting outside in the getaway car, and they sped off into the night. The next day at the hideout, the team gathered one last time. Parker pulled out the diamonds he had salvaged from the explosion, the real prize he had hidden before the blast. True to his word, he insisted they split the take evenly.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe for more. Let me know what you think in the comments below. See you in the next recap.